What's up everyone? My name's Ryan Pfeiffer and you're watching Shape and Explore. Today we're going to be making this DIY mid-century modern inspired bed frame utilizing dimensional lumber that I got from my local home center. If you guys can't tell, I live in a basement apartment and the ceiling height in here really isn't that tall. So the whole point of this bed frame was to emphasize the low horizontal lines within the room and help to distract from the fact that the ceilings aren't that tall. Let's get started. I designed this bed frame to accommodate a full-size mattress, but the design can definitely be scaled to fit anything larger or smaller. I started by cross-cutting everything to rough length. I'll be using 2x12s, 2x10s, and 2x8s to form the main components of the bed frame. I used my table saw to rip off the rounded edges for a more modern look, then ripped the 2x6s to their final width of 4 inches. Here you can see the dimensions of the major components we just cut. These are for a full-size mattress, so the lengths may change depending on your project. Next, I used my pocket hole jig to pre-drill holes on both ends of the 2x8s. Also, add holes on only one of the 2x8s running the entire length. Then, I added lengthwise pocket holes to one side of both 2x12s. Then, it was time to attach the 2x6s, which we ripped down to 4 inches, to the 2x12s using glue and pocket hole screws. These will form the side rails of the bed frame. Be sure that the two pieces are only flush on one end. I then used a damp rag to wipe away any glue squeeze out. With the side rails completed, I began the rough assembly of the bed frame. Originally, I had designed the footboard to be flush with the end of the bed frame, but as I went, I decided it looked better with an inset to match the side rails. So I measured in 1.5 inches from the end of the existing side rail, then used my circular saw to trim off the excess. With both side rails trimmed to length, I could resume the rough assembly. I made sure to use a speed square and a large framing square to help keep everything at 90 degrees. With the frame assembled, I could test the footrail and mark it to its final length. Then trim it off and glue and screw it into place. After that, I mounted 2x4s to the inner face of the side rails. These will provide support for the mattress slats, and I used a stack of scrap wood to get the 2x4s to the desired height. Next, I got ready to install the headboard supports. For this, I'd be using a spade bit and carriage bolts. I wanted to countersink the carriage bolts, so I had to be sure that the washer and socket wrench would fit within the hole. Then I clamped my speed square in place and used it as a reference for the headboard support piece. I pre-drilled with the spade bit, then finished the hole with a 1/4 inch drill bit, then tapped the bolt in from the back, making sure to end with some solid wax to hold it in place. Next I could install the washer and nut, being sure not to over-tighten with the socket wrench. I repeated this process for each bolt, doing them individually to prevent misalignment. Then I clamped in some spacer blocks. I realized the headboard hadn't been trimmed to its final length, so I went ahead and did that. Then I could begin mounting the headboard. I used a small scrap of wood as a spacer to make sure everything was aligned. I noticed some slight cupping on the headboard, so I used a lot of screws to mount it in place and make sure it was nice and straight. With the rough assembly complete, it was time to disassemble everything and prep for finishing. I made several passes with my sander, going from 80 grit all the way up to 220 grit. Then I lightly rounded any sharp edges with the sanding sponge. To finish the wood, I used Minwax polyacrylic in satin. It's water-based and only takes a few hours to dry between coats. Applying finish raises the grain, so I sanded lightly with 220 in between coats. I applied 3 coats in total. With all of the wood finished, I began the final assembly. To make sure everything was square, I had to get a little creative with extra clamps and straps. Off camera, I cut down some 2x4s to act as extra supports for the mattress slats. After that, I could carefully reinstall the headboard, being sure not to over-tighten the bolts. Next, I set up a stop block on my chop saw and batched out all of the mattress slats. Then I could start installing the slats. I won't be using a box spring, so I spaced them quite tightly together and used one slat turned sideways as a spacer to keep the gaps consistent. Once all the slats were installed, the bed was complete. I hope that you guys enjoyed this project. Building a furniture piece of this scale definitely comes with its own unique set of challenges. This is the largest piece that I've made so far, and I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. I'm still working on the overall design and layout of how my bedroom's going to look, so I wanted to keep the bed as versatile and simple as possible. That way it can be adapted to different situations depending on how the overall design evolves. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up below, and feel free to leave any questions or comments there as well. If you're new to my channel, I'd like to say welcome, and consider subscribing. That way you can stay up to date on all my newest builds. Follow the links on screen for more projects, and I'll see you guys next time on Shape and Explore.